I'm Ellie Court, and you're listening to the Soils for Life podcast. This conversation is part of a series of short conversations with the farmers profiled in our new cropping practice guides, giving you a very quick intro to how they've introduced new practices into their enterprises. This conversation is with Michael Waring, a sugarcane farmer in the Herbert Valley in North Queensland. After starting out as a sugarcane agronomist, Michael took over the family farm in 2000. Michael's been implementing multispecies cover cropping and other practices designed to improve soil health, and as a result has almost eliminated the need for nitrogen fertiliser at planting. He was involved in Soils for Life's recently published practice guide to improving nitrogen cycling and efficiency. In this conversation, Michael shares his thoughts on this critical topic and his strategies for improving nitrogen cycling on his farm. If you enjoy this conversation, check out the full guide on our website, soilsforlife.org.au. And if you know of someone else who might be interested in this conversation, please share it around. Okay, on to the episode. Please enjoy my conversation with Michael Waring. Maybe we'll just start by, if I could get you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your farm.
I was born on a sugarcane farm, went to Gatton Ag College, did several different types of jobs around the country, travelled, that sort of thing. Finally settled into working for what's called the Herbert Cane Productivity Board. Worked there for 27 years as an agronomist, then worked for Terrain NRM, which is the wet tropics natural resource management group, for 9 years. And after that, I was solely on the farm.
And how's that transition gone?
Well, to go from working 3 days a week and running the farm was a very busy lifestyle. I got a lot of things done that I didn't have time to get done before.
Yeah.
And the farm has 140 hectares of under sugarcane.
A sort of typical size for a sugarcane enterprise in that area?
Yeah, it's probably an average size, I suppose. Sugarcane farms in this area range from probably 700 or 800 hectares down to 10 hectares.
So you've recently been helping us to develop this practice guide on improving nitrogen cycling and efficiency. And part of the reason we reached out to you is that you made a whole range of changes on your farm designed, among other things, to improve nitrogen cycling and ultimately reduce the need for nitrogen inputs. So I'm interested in why you started looking in that direction.
Well, in about 2007, I went on a field tour that went to the Mackay cane growing region, and we went on this tour and saw these farmers that were farming on 1.8 to 2 metre row widths and how they were doing it, and they were using controlled traffic. And it made a lot of sense to me that at a cane harvester that we buy from overseas, all Australian harvesters come from overseas, they have a wheel or a track centre of 1.9 metres. So if you're farming on 1.5 metres, as we were at the time, every time you go up and down with the harvester and the haul-outs beside the harvester, you're driving on top of the cane you're trying to grow, so compaction. I saw that as a real problem, especially we're in the wet tropics. A lot of time we're harvesting cane under suboptimal conditions where it's too wet, but the harvester's not getting bogged and we need to get the crop off, so they're cutting. A cane harvester weighs around 24 tonnes. A loaded haul out is nearly up there too. So I could see that as being pretty obviously as a restriction to the growth on that cane on the following crop. So that was one thing. After that, I came back and with a mate, we started purchasing some subsidies that were available at the time. We purchased a GPS controller to do that. We went to wider rows. We bought a planter that could plant the wider rows. From about 2008, we started that. And then with sort of cover crops in the fallow of the sugarcane crop, I was growing soya beans on mounds, which was a step forward for the whole industry, because before that we were trying to grow legumes such as cowpea and lab on the flat, and waterlogging killed it probably 8 out of 10 years. So most people had given up trying to grow cover crops. The move to soybeans and on a mound made a huge difference in the success rate.
So what does the rotation of cane and then into a intended cover crop typically look like? And now what have you shifted to?
So in the herbert, a typical rotation is a 5 to 6 year rotation. But to explain that more to people who don't know about sugarcane's a giant grass. So each year we plant about 15% of our property as a plant cane, and then in the following year that's harvested, and like a grass, it's just cut off at ground level and it comes back up again. And that's fertilised and weed control. That's what we call a ratoon. Generally, we'll have about 5 harvests of a field. So we'll harvest that field for 5 years. And then in November, it'll probably be the last block cut, and it will be fallowed. So the cane will be taken out either mechanically or chemically. And then from November till July, depending on the year and the weather, of course, but it will be fallow. And in July, it will be planted back into cane again and do that cycle. So as you can understand from that explanation, we were very much a monoculture. We are very much a monoculture industry. I think any farmer knows how that's not a good thing, but that's sort of what we're stuck with in our environment now and what we grow. So in that fallow period, we try and grow something that protects the soil, has plants in the soil, live plants in the soil for as much as that time as possible, and also has a small, well, not a huge effect, but an effect on that monoculture and breaking that monoculture cycle. So in the early, when we first started, I started as others did with soybeans, which was successful. But then as I learnt more and more about soil health and building your soil health up, we learnt that, we shouldn't be growing another monoculture. We should be growing a diverse range of species in that fallow period. And through a few years of trial and error and failures, we've come up with a mix of 4 or 5 species that will survive the wet season in the tropics. And yeah, we're talking, that may not understand how wet it is in the wet tropics in the summer months and early autumn, I suppose you'd call it. The average rainfall is just over 2 metres, but some years we'll just over 1 metre, and other years we get 4 metres. And probably 90% in most cases of that rain will fall between December and May. So, there's a lot of water.
And so, as you were saying, you have to choose species very carefully to find the right species that will fit in that context.
Yes. And then I learnt more from people like David Hardwick about soil health and how to build better structure, how to change your soil health so that it's better for your plant, for your cane crop, was to have a multi-species in there. And the multi-species needed to survive the wet season and the wet tropics, but also quite often when we had in our trialling and that, we found that one species was so strong that it dominated all the rest, so you didn't get a good mix. And that was choosing, then we had to choose the right species to go together, but secondly also get the seeding rate right. Some plants take off very quickly and establish, and if there's too many of them, they'll shade out the plants that are slower getting away. So we had to work out that species mix that worked for us. And the farmers that I work with, and we talk about these sorts of things and what we can do, I think they all use a slightly different mix of species and seed rating, but it's working for them. The other thing when you're deciding on a species in your cover crops is you don't want something that's going to be a weed in your following crop. So What would be ideal for us would be to grow a grass of some description in there as well, and we've tried forage sorghum, those sorts of things. The risk with any grass for us is that it seeds and then it's a problem in our cane crop. So, if you're growing a legume crop, you have to, you'd want to be careful what sort of legumes you're growing, or you probably wouldn't grow legumes before a legume crop, but, you have to choose a species that aren't going to become weeds in your crop.
Did we actually share in the practice guide your preferred mix?
I don't think so.
No. Okay. I mean, if you're happy to share, could you say a little bit about what you ended up with?
Yeah. So in that mix, I currently use soybeans, sunflowers, sun hemp, which is a legume as well. It's not a hemp, despite its name, and usually ebony cowpea is the mix I've been using. The sunflowers get away very quickly, so they get up. The sun hemp gets away very quickly too. The soybeans are slower, so you don't want, and we've made that mistake before with too much sun hemp or too much sunflower. The soybeans get away slower, but then when they get established, they're very strong and power on. The cowpea is slower to establish, but what it does is when you have those taller plants there, the cowpea climbs over the top of them. And so it does its thing a fair bit later than what the others are doing. But they're all in the ground, they're growing for that time.
Yeah, brilliant. And how long was that period of time where you were experimenting to find what worked?
I've probably been settled on this mix for the last probably 5 years now, 4 years. We were probably mucking around for probably nearly 10 years, different mixes, different rates and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, and hopefully, I guess we're hoping that we can shortcut the process for other farmers. I mean, obviously, there's always some experimentation needed to find out what works in your particular location, but yeah, hopefully we can shortcut that process for others. So to bring that back to nitrogen cycling, how does that factor into the decision about which species you plant and into this decision more generally about moving towards multi-species cover crops?
Sugarcane being a grass, we try and keep as much of that nitrogen there until we plant sugarcane. And one of the problems, I suppose, we have is that the cover crop I'm currently growing only takes about 3 months to come to maturity. And if that's planted in December, which is typically when we plant, when we would plant it, because we need to get it established before we get heavy rain, that plant matures by the beginning of April, generally. And we want to hold that organic matter, which the nitrogen is in, as long as possible, because once you put that organic matter, if you cultivate that organic matter back into the soil, it then starts to become available nitrogen in the soil, which is in our environments very easy to lose that then, or with the rainfall. So if you've got nitrates in your soil and you get 100 mil of rain, you're going to lose a lot through denitrification or leaching. So we spray the cover crop. So I'll terminate the cover crop in about the beginning of April, middle of April. And if I can't get on there with a machine tractor to do it, then it'll be done by drone or plane. And it'll just stay like that until probably for 2 months, depending on the year again, but usually about 2 months. It'll stay like that until we believe we're ready to plant and we get the ground ready just before. So we incorporate that dry matter, or it's dry matter by now, all that organic matter and bulk that we've got there into the ground as close as possible to planting the cane. Because cane is planted as a piece of sugar cane in the ground, and germination is quite slow. And in the early stages of germination, the piece of cane, or we call a billet, is the food source for the young shoot. So it doesn't need any nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, those sorts of things for approximately 2 months. So we want to conserve that nitrogen that we've produced in our legumes for as long as possible, where then the sugarcane can take it up.
Yeah.
So there's a window in there from when we cultivate to when the plant gets to 2 to 3 months old, where it starts to take that up, that the nitrogen is vulnerable to loss. And that's, we can't do much about that window, but we can make that window as small as possible.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And so what have the results been of that? How has that changed the way that you use nitrogen inputs around planting?
So the sugarcane industry in Queensland is regulated by what's called reef regulations in the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus that we can put on each year onto a crop of cane, and that's determined by a soil test. Most of the country that I farm would tell me that I'm allowed to put on about 110 kilos of nitrogen per hectare to grow the plant crop.
And is that what your typical enterprise might do?
That would be what a typical enterprise is doing, yes. I currently use about 20 kilos of nitrogen at planting, 5 kilos of phosphorus, and usually no potassium because you get root burn, so I sort of generally steer away from it. And that's all it gets at planting, and that will be the total if we've had a good legume crop and it's carried through, and I'm confident that the cane's going to get that. That's all the nitrogen that the plant crop gets, so it gets about 20 kilos, and then it'll get phosphorus and potassium later when it's at what we call that a hand stage, so about knee high.
Yeah. And so that sounds like that strategy of bringing in the multi-species cover crops, the legume dominated mix of multi-species cover crop has done the job that you intended it to do when it comes to providing a source of nitrogen for the plants.
It definitely does the job because the plant crops I grow now are equal to what I've always grown. I've never thought, sometimes it may be better, but I don't like to tell people that it's better. I think it's the same, but it's costing me a lot less. And I think if people work on that assumption, then it can only get better than that, put it that way.
And I believe you're also using some biological inputs as well. Could you tell me a little bit about what you're using and how that works?
Yep. So for nitrogen, I've explained what we do in the plant crop, but in the return crop, I used about 140 kilos of nitrogen on the return crop annually. With the controlled traffic, the cover crops, the reduced tillage in the fallow, my nitrogen input is about 110, and over the years I've been bringing that down step by step and watching it, but generally it's on 110. The other main ingredient that I vary is phosphorus. So in the past I've used the recommended rate of phosphorus depending on the soil test, which is between 0 and probably 30 kilos of PEEP annually. In the last 4 or 5 years, I've started using a product from a company called Metagen called Evergrow. This is a biological product that makes the phosphorus. So our soils and most soils in Australia, I believe, have quite a lot of phosphorus in them. It's just not plant available. So this biological product makes the phosphorus, the mineral phosphorus in the soil, makes some of it available to the plant. So I did a couple of years trialling it and leaf sampling to make sure it was working. In the last couple of years, I haven't been putting phosphorus on. I've just been putting Evergrow as a liquid injected in with the urea and the potassium that I put on. That's been very successful to date, and there's more and more farmers using that now. So it seems to be working very well so far.
Oh, that's great. And just to be clear, there's no phosphorus in that product. That's a biological product that's intended to simply unlock the phosphorus that's already there in the soil.
That's correct, yeah. There's no phosphorus in it. There has been, in a couple of trials, it's shown that it actually you can actually reduce your nitrogen by using this product as well. I haven't done that because there's only been 2 or 3 trials so far, and it depends on your soil type again and all sorts of things. But yeah, at this stage, it's just for the phosphorus.
Yeah, and you've had no phosphorus deficiency even though you've stopped applying phosphorus.
Yes, phosphorus,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's only for a
And
couple of years, so, I'll keep taking leaf samples and monitoring it, that the plant is getting enough phosphorus from that, but it definitely looks like it's working so far.
yeah, great. And financially, does it stack up in terms of the reduction in phosphorus inputs and the cost of this biological product?
Yeah, depending on your phosphorus rate that you require. But the calculations I did for myself, it's probably an equal cost
Yeah.
to applying phosphorus.
With presumably an environmental benefit.
Yes, definitely. And as has been identified here, and why we have reef regulations in Queensland on the sugar industry, is that phosphorus has been making its way to the inner lagoons of the barrier reef in sediment, because phosphorus is not soluble, but it carries with the sediment, any sediment loss.
That sort of thing does seem like one piece of the puzzle of helping to address the issue that those regulations are trying to address. That's all really fantastic work, Michael. Do you have anything that you would add for other farmers who are curious about how they might approach nitrogen management differently?
Probably the first thing is there's no one silver bullet. That's the big thing. I find that a lot of people think that, all right, I grow a cover crop and that'll, fix the problems. Well, it's more than that. It's the reduced tillage, it's the controlled traffic. I mean, every time you cultivate soil, you burn nitrogen. You turn it into gas and carbon. So, you reducing your tillage to the minimal amount, and because of the way we plant sugarcane, we do need, and I have tried planting without tillage and haven't succeeded. Hopefully someday somebody will work out how to do that, and then you can leave the cover crop on top of the ground and just plant through it.
There's a great quote, I think it was from one of the other farmers in this guide, and he said, nitrogen management is about everything other than nitrogen.
Yeah, and if you want to improve your nitrogen management, you have to improve multiple practices, not just one. Yeah. And also, I suppose the other thing is trial something. Trial it, measure it, and see what your results are. Because never, and I've seen farmers do it, go, oh, this is amazing, and do it on their whole farm and find out it's not so good. Try a piece, do it. If it doesn't work, find out why it didn't work. You need to change something or do something differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate both your generous sharing of your knowledge and your experience today, but also in the practice guide. And I hope that this can be helpful to other farmers who are curious about or investigating how they can build soil health and improve nitrogen cycling on their own farms. So thanks so much.
People shared a lot of information with me, and that's how I learnt. So, try and help other people by sharing what I've learnt.
Yeah, good on you. This short episode of the Soils for Life podcast was hosted by me, Ellie Court, and produced by Chris Whiffering. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening, and share it with your friends and neighbours. You can find the full practice guide on improving nitrogen cycling and efficiency that Michael Waring is profiled in at soilsforlife.org.au. And while you're there, you might want to check out the other 9 guides on cropping practices that build soil health and drought resilience. We'll be bringing you more of these mini podcasts over the coming months, so hit subscribe and look out for them in your feed. Thanks for listening.